All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right, welcome everybody to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. I am super excited. I am joined, let's see if you can guess it, okay? I am joined by someone who's a multiple-time entrepreneur, CEO, investor, board member, author, lover of bright clothing, Dark Knight fan, physics aficionado, and Steelers fan. Can you guess it? If you can't, it is Mr. Nick Mehta. Nick, it is very, very great to have you. I'm super excited for you to join me today.
Jake, I love it. And I do believe there's only one person in the center of that Venn diagram of all those different sets. So very happy to be that one person.
I love it. And is Dark Knight still your favorite movie?
You went deep on the research on that one. Yeah, it's interesting. I think so. It's hard to see. I'm sure I'm just like you, where you have like a set of movies. Dark Knight's definitely one of them. The other one, being a dad, a science fiction nerd, and a dad with with my older daughter, 14, Interstellar. And when Matthew McConaughey is like crying his eyes out when he watches his daughter grow up, that's how I feel like every day as I watch my kids grow up. So man. I'm totally that sappy Matthew McConaughey dad. So and if I got a chance to volunteer to go to some through some wormhole to another place, I probably would volunteer for that too. So I'm many ways I like Interstellar.
Okay, all right. So you're connected on that in a lot of metaphysical ways.
Exactly. Well done.
I don't know if you got that.
It'll sink in a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Just go check out his blog. It's pretty amazing, everyone. So let's get started. I mean, if you've listened to other episodes before, we talk about the journey, and that's really the goal here, is to talk about where we came from, where we're at today, and where we're going. And so let's start back in Pittsburgh, man. So You're back in Pittsburgh, okay? From what I understand, had a computer at the age of six years old. You started computer programming, which is absolutely wild to me. So tell me a little bit, man. What was it like for you growing up in Pittsburgh? What were some of the high points? Obviously, you're a massive Steelers fan too, which I love that you're keeping it real, keeping it hometown. What were some of the high points for you? And then obviously, look, kind of reading some other talks that you had, I know that there were some interesting dynamics for you around high school and in other periods of your life where, being an Indian American and an almost all white, I looked at the demographics on Wikipedia. It was like 89% white high school. So I'd love to know just a little bit about what was early Nick like, obviously doing computer programming, growing up in a really different environment, and what were some of the big takeaways you had at that stage in your life, man?
Yeah, totally. That's a great question. It's good to go back to the beginning. So for me, I grew up in Pittsburgh. The reason I got into computers is my dad worked in technology. He worked at some of the older mainframe mini computer companies like Digital Equipment in the 70s. And then he actually ran his own small business. It was never a big thing, but kind of small kind of computer, basically like a reseller. They would sell technology for other companies. And so because of that, he was always getting new computers, and they would just show up at our house and they would be sold to customers, but they were always in transit there. And so I got to just try out all these new things, and they were totally when I see pictures of those old computers from the 80s, it brings back those nostalgic memories. Other people might have nostalgia about hanging out with friends. I had nostalgia about hanging out with my IBM PC with the 4.77 megahertz, processor and two 5 1/4 inch floppy disk drives and 300 baud modem.
Actual floppy disks. Let's be very, very clear here.
This takes
Most people do not know what the actual floppy.
Many generations back. Yeah, it's a long time ago. Hard to explain, but basically, I had computers since I was a little kid. Very fortunate, to have had those, and just got into programming and video games and all that kind of stuff. Something called a bulletin board system was pre-internet version of connecting your computer to other computers and being able to play games against other people and chat and stuff like that. So I was around all that stuff as a kid. So that's kind of one fundamental influence. A second influence actually with my dad and my parents. Indian Americans, one of the common stereotypes that seems to be often true is the sort of pressure, and probably not just Indian Americans, but a lot of immigrants of they want their kids to be successful, right? And so my parents definitely success was a big thing from the time we were little. And it was all about like, what college you can go to and what job you can have. And can you be the CEO of one or be a doctor or whatever. So that was definitely, I remember there was a moment in probably I was like 10 years old and like Bill Gates was on the cover of Time magazine. And he was like the richest man in the world or youngest billionaire, something like that.
Youngest billionaire. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And I remember my dad, pointing to that and saying, "Hey, I'd love to see you do this someday." And so the bar was pretty high from the beginning. And so I always had that. Frankly, to this day, I still have that. Like, am I really doing enough with my life? So I had the technical kind of, programming and all that. I had the, desire to do something and maybe a little bit of like feeling like I haven't achieved enough, and it kind of carried forward. And then the third kind of influence shaped me, like you said, was, people usually find this pretty shocking, but I definitely have gotten comfortable in my own skin and communicating and connecting with people. And most people would say I'm an extreme extrovert. But as a kid, all the way from kindergarten through 12th grade, for whatever reason, I just never felt like I fit in. I'm sure some combination of like being, like you said, sticking out a little bit visually like a sore thumb. And I think it might have been even more than 89% when I was there.
Back then.
Definitely felt like it. So, sticking out like a sore thumb a little bit, looking different. Being nerdy, maybe being a little intimidated, being shy. Bottom line is I literally never made a friend group and kind of was always that kid that was that weird kid sitting on his own in the classroom, in the lunchroom from like kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So literally, I mean, I actually had so many memories of high school where by high school, I was actually ashamed of that, right? Like you're like, oh my God, not only do I not have any friends, I have to actually demonstrate that fact to everyone every day in the lunchroom. So what I did was I actually would get my lunch and then go to the computer lab and like pretend to like have to do computer work and just like work there or go hide in the library or whatever. I think there are kids, who have experienced similar things. And then something happened. I don't know exactly. No, it's some combination of going to college and being able to restart and making some equally nerdy friends or something. And then actually, honestly, I met my now wife in high school, and I guess being able to find somebody that actually liked me for who I am gave me some confidence. Probably the combination of those two things. I sort of, turned into the proverbial butterfly from the cocoon. So, yeah.
The color. When did the fashion start? When did the dressing start? I'm going to guess that was not high school.
That's another interesting thing, Jake. Like, it's funny. I do love clothes now for sure. And, but that's another hilarious one. If you just went back, I first startup, which I'm sure, first startup, it's, called Chip Shot. We'll probably talk about it. And like, I was like, just terribly dressed. Like, I mean, like offensively bad Dockers and like, the company polo shirt or, the logo kind of company shirt or whatever, not tucked in properly or half tucked in. And, like wearing, the socks that don't match with the sneakers that don't match with the, jeans and everything, all the mistakes. And then what's funny is I got to a level of like, I think like normal, acceptable, boring in my last company, this company called Live Office. And there was actually, amazingly, there was this guy named Rocco, and Rocco was he was a head of director of sales. And
of course he was.
Yeah. And he actually is so great. Still like somebody I think of dearly. And it's funny because he always dressed like super fancy. And everyone kind of teased him because he was that guy who had like, the pocket squares.
Yeah, pocket square. Yeah.
And I was right there with everyone else teasing Rocco. And then somehow years later, I became Rocco. Really a gain site. Like literally, actually, I years ago, I read this blog post and it's a super actionable blog post. It said, number one networking tip, wear red shoes. And the idea was if you do want to build your own like personality and stand out, like what you wear can actually make you stand out. People remember it. It's a fun conversation starter. So I do have silly shoes and like colorful stuff and I actually enjoy it. And also it gives people something to talk about like we're doing right now. So,
yeah. I love it, man. Yeah. I think as long as, do you ever wear the bow tie? Do you ever go bow tie?
So I haven't quite become the bow tie guy yet. That's like the next level. I'm sure I will become the bow tie guy that, that it's happening at some point, but it hasn't happened to me yet.
Okay, good. Let's. I don't know about the bow tie. I mean, no offense. Like, if you love bow ties and you rock it, that's your jam. I get it.
I see a decent number of sales professionals actually that are the bow tie people. It's been interesting to watch. Yeah,
that's what. Well, I think it's like what you said. It's about standing out and being a little bit different, which is fine, which is great. But also you got to be yourself. So all right. So 100%. Possibly bow ties. We'll go there. So all right. So then you graduate. You meet the love of your life, which is pretty great in high school. So you had one friend. You had one.
Yeah, exactly. She was different high school. Different high school though, so it still didn't help me at lunchtime.
Okay, didn't help at lunch. So then you go to Harvard, man. You're a biochem right? In Harvard College.
Yep.
You do a lot of what I would call it very Harvard things. You are an IBM internship, investment Goldman Sachs analyst, another investment bank, but you then end up going the computer science route, but you're a biochem. So tell me, like, what was it like for you at Harvard? Obviously, you kind of did a little mix, right? You were kind of doing these things that it seemed like you were passionate about early on, but then, some of the internships, I'd call it, were the Harvard checkboxes. Only McKinsey was missing, though.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I need to go back and finish that one. No, I mean, so very astute question, Jake. Being honest, go back to my parents. In the stereotype of Indian Americans in America, there's certainly a lot of people that become doctors, or historically did, and their doctors are held in high esteem. So my mom definitely would have liked nothing more than for me to be a doctor. And so the biochem degree was probably,
I got it. Okay, makes sense.
Making mom happy. But actually, about a year and a half in, I was like, I don't love it. And my dad was a computer person, as we talked about already. And so I actually did this thing where I basically did 2 degrees. I did like a master's in CS and a bachelor's of biochemistry kind of together. And so I was able to make mom and dad happy, which is great. But I knew my kind of real love was business and technology and all that. So it was sort of the thing that I was gravitating towards, and the biochem stuff, I wasn't the person that was hanging out talking about organic chemistry every night. So although more power to those people.
So what were the high points there, man? Whenever you look back, I know we're going back a few years. Like, what were some of the high points for you as you're going through this? God, this is like, you couldn't have picked easier ones. Like, you could have picked like philosophy or something.
I know. Well, it's funny because
no offense to my philosophy majors out there, but
we were talking about it this morning. Philosophy's hard. We were talking about this morning that, like, in our company meeting, that we were talking. We have an icebreaker every Monday, and today's icebreaker was, what was your favorite subject in school? And all of the people that were science majors' favorite subjects were the liberal arts subjects. And all the people that were liberal arts majors' favorite subjects were the science subjects. So it's kind of funny. We always want what we didn't have. And so for me in college, high points, I mentioned I found some friends. And so I actually have been super lucky that, like, the four guys I roomed with in college are still my four of my best friends, in the world. And we actually have a Zoom call every Sunday night and chat. And so it's kind of great, regress to 18-year-old boys every Sunday, which is awesome.
It happens.
So that was one high point. And another one was, which kind of connects to the next chapter, is in computer science class, I met another person who ended up becoming another one of my best friends. And he had an idea to start an internet company. And that kind of brought me into the internet world and, California and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, all right. So you get a chance to meet friends, right? Yeah. That's a good piece. What about tough points? What about, obviously, the academic rigor has got to be hard. But what about tough points, during that phase where, I think a lot of people would look, this guy went to Harvard, finished in basically 4 years, 2 degrees, right? Had these amazing opportunities. But what do you feel like some of your other takeaways were from a tough point, other than just like pure workload?
Yeah, I think the one of the hardest things was I think a lot of people might have experienced this, where you go from one environment where you feel like you can be really competitive and successful, then you go into the bigger leagues, whatever that is, whether that's sports or academics. And so in high school, the high school I was in, I did well, and things felt easy. And then I remember you just thought I was like the smartest kid in the world, and I get into freshman year, and Harvard, like a lot of schools, it's like concentrating all these smart kids together, right? And so I remember taking like the hardest math class they had, and just getting my butt kicked. It was like the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, and into academically, and just realizing, now you're smart, but you're not that smart, right? So like kind of very humbling experience to be kind of cold water in your face, 18 years old or whatever. So that was definitely one thing. And I think that's sort of like just generally finding that level that is challenging, but not impossible. That's like, because I think that a lot of us in our careers, you're always wanting to be on that edge where it's hard. You want to work on something hard, but you don't want to work on something that you can't do it all. And then frankly, it just like reinforces the negative cycle of not wanting to do it. So that class was my okay, wake up call, be humble. You're a smart kid, but you're not as smart as you think you are. And so that was probably one of them. The other one I think was actually something I kind of regret a little bit is, and I always feel like college is almost in some ways, it's too early for people, where like you don't have the appreciation of life, and you're studying all these amazing things, and yet you can't appreciate them. And so therefore, like, honestly, I was probably like most kids, like way more excited about hanging out with friends and going out to bars and blah, 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 right? Like a lot of people. And so, but now I actually am like, I read a ton and I actually kind of wish I could go back to college now.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think I appreciated all of the amazing stuff and professors and all those things. So that's not a low point from college, but something I reflect on a lot. We need a second, we need a second kind of like part of our life where we get to go back to school. And some people do it, you know. That's my wife says that's what I should do after business is go.
You should, man. Yeah, no, I can relate. You know, I went, I went back to get my MBA, you know, 4 or 5 years after, and it was for that exact reason. Like, I'm like, I want to learn new, like, you know, as a successful sales leader, I was like, there's more out here. And I totally got it. I totally got that exact experience where like, I went to like learn stuff, right? As opposed to check a box.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I think that even so many people even treat their master's degree like a checkbox. Like they just want the network or as opposed to like the learning. And I was like, this is great. Like I love stats and like, you know, learning all these new things. So then you go, it's like you were mentioning, all right. So you leave, you go to Chip Shot. Okay. Yeah. So and is this a buddy? This is a buddy from college, right?
Yeah. We were in computer science class together and this guy had, he was on the golf team. And he wanted to start a business basically selling internet based golf clubs, right? And golf clubs
right.
Early.
Smart idea.
Very early, like mid 90s. And he started himself and then brought me on as a co-founder and brought on a couple other co-founders. So yeah, that's chipshot.com.
And I'm going to link to Chip Shot just so everyone can see this commercial on YouTube. Okay. It is a great commercial.
Pretty good.
Where a guy hits the ball. I'm not going to steal. I'm not going to steal the thunder.
Yeah, they got to see it.
I can't spoil it, but it is worth it. I will put the link to the YouTube in the show notes. So tell me about that. I mean, and you described it elsewhere as, you know, wasn't as successful, right? But what did that, you know, for you, like, what did you learn from that experience? Obviously, you know, a bunch of smart guys from Harvard getting together, right? It's probably not going to be horrible, but at the same time, it obviously, you know, you don't necessarily describe it as a success. So tell me about the learning there, because that was really, you know, your first, you know, few years out.
Yeah, totally. So basically, we did the startup in college, and then we were, as you were alluding to, Jake, like we were all going to go down the typical Harvard checkbox path of like go work in consulting or investment banking. I was going to work in investment banking, but we all decided instead to do this startup full time after college. So basically, we said, let's just go keep doing this.
Love it.
And it was really small at the time, but it was not zero. So we're like, maybe there's something here. And summer of 1998, we all packed up, graduated, moved to California, and moved into my co-founder's parents' house in Saratoga, which is like basically near San Jose, California. Okay. And we all like lived in his parents' house and like worked in their garage, literally put the computers in the garage. And this is like for people that are, you know, younger than us, you know, this is a long time ago. So, you know, you literally have like dial-up modems, like connecting phone lines into your computers. It's a long time ago. Anyways, we're running this company and basically like taking orders for golf clubs, like doing the customer service, shipping the product to the customers, and actually entertainingly, like my co-founder's mom would come home from work and she'd like open the garage and we'd be on the phone with a customer and the customer would be like, what's that noise in the background? We'd be like, that's a new shipment coming in through the loading dock. So we didn't have a cover story that we weren't just working out of our parents' and friends' parents' garage. But we were running the startup, and then what ended up happening is it was summer of 1998, which is just when that like first wave of the internet
was just hitting.
And so we ended up just randomly meeting investors, and one of the investors we met was this firm that we had no idea that they were big at the time, but called Sequoia Capital, which
it's small time.
Everyone in the it's funny because we really didn't know them, and I remember walking into their office and seeing on the wall like Yahoo and Oracle and Cisco, and they'd funded like every big company out there. And we were like, these guys seem legit. And so they ended up funding the company, which is crazy. We were like 20 years old and this like kind of a hot startup on magazine covers. And we raised, you know, a decent amount of money, probably over time, like 30 million bucks, nothing in today's world, but back then that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we had like, you know, TV commercials on like March Madness. We had billboards. We had, you know, John Elway was our spokesperson. So we literally, I knew your football.
As a Chiefs fan, we don't talk about John Elway.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Especially around that time period.
Back then he was your arch rival. And so we're talking about John, you know, I was shooting a TV commercial with John Elway, which was crazy. So the whole thing was like surreal and it was really fun. And then we basically, hear what you alluded to, the company grew a lot, but then didn't get public before the stock market crashed. And we had raised so much money that we eventually sold it, but basically nobody made any money off it. but it was still an awesome experience. I mean, honestly, for like by the time it was all over, it was like we were 22 years old. So it was incredible crash course in business and all that, and kind of most importantly got me to California, which is, we're sitting here 20 years later and we're still here. So
I love it, man. I love it. So when did you graduate? How old were you when you graduated high school then?
I think like 17 or something like that.
Okay. All right. So you got through quick though. If you started the company and you were 20.
Yeah, we started like senior year. Yeah, the whole thing went really fast. Yeah, by like 20, it was like a couple years later. Yeah, so
I love it, man. So then you go to X Degrees for a little bit.
Yeah, that was a little startup, real brief, and then we got acquired, and
you got acquired, and so this is where you get into like the product world, and so this is really interesting, right? So you go from being kind of CEO or helping to run a company, then you start to get into this like product world. Like, right. What was it for you that? Because I think what happens is a lot of people early on get locked in. Right. Yeah. They kind of go down a path and they're hesitant because maybe it's applicable or not applicable. What was it for you as you started to make this move to Veritas, which then became, Symantec? Why the move to product? What was it for you that product did that maybe the other parts of the business were maybe not less interesting, but why was product an area where you wanted to spend more time?
Yeah, it's funny. You're totally right, by the way, about path dependency. Like you end up doing something just because you've done something before and you do the next thing because you did the last thing. And I think a lot of our life is pretty random that way. For me, I kind of studied computer science, as you alluded to. I was kind of, technical enough. I never thought I was going to be the world's best engineer. Going back to like, I wasn't amazing in math. Like I was pretty good at math, but not amazing. And so
that stuck with you. That freshman math class.
That freshman math. Oh, that's math 25. That's like
you'll never forget.
I'll never forget. It's like a formative thing. We talk. Actually, my college roommates and I still talk about it. It's funny. So basically that I like technology, but I didn't feel like I wanted to be the person or would be the best person, writing the code. And at that point I'd started becoming a little more extrovert, so a little more customer oriented and all that. And so I think I kind of just was interested in those product management type jobs because they sort of are in between the business and the technology, so connecting the two. And so I honestly, like 2002 is actually, like, as you might remember, it wasn't a great time for the economy. We'd had the dot-com crash, tech was like out of favor to a large degree. It's funny. I remember meeting a venture capitalist. I won't say who, but very famous one. And, in 2002, so I'd had my chip shot startup, and then that second company, X Degrees, I didn't found, but I was there, and it's got sold, but it didn't really end up taking off. And so I remember like going to meet this famous venture capitalist and asking for advice. And I thought, oh, this is Silicon Valley. He would tell me, don't worry, like just because you had a couple things that don't work out, next one's going to work out. And I remember this guy looking at my resume and like sitting with me and saying, well, I look at your resume and I see chip shot, failure, X Degrees, failure. You better watch out or you're going to become branded as a serial failure. And I was like, literally, like at that point, 24 years old. And I'm in vulnerability. I actually went home that night and like cried. That was like,
oh man.
And so anyways, I was like,
we have to figure out, I'm going to try to triangulate and figure out who this was. I already have like a couple ideas.
He's famous. By the way, I think he had the best of intentions. I think he was trying to help me.
Of course he was. No, I totally get it. I'm not quite. I've probably had conversations like that, if I'm being very honest with people.
Yeah. It's sometimes people give you tough love. And so I basically, was like, let me go get a job at a company that I know is going to be around and do product management, kind of like the technology business angle. And so I went to this company, Veritas, which is a small, publicly traded company, like 5,000 people. So not a giant company, but not a little startup either. And and so I kind of jumped into like working for somebody. What's weird is when the first thing you do is start your own company, you're kind of ruined for life because you're not like going through that machine of like working for other people.
Right.
And so I ended up working at Veritas, and we can talk more about it, but that was like my first and probably only real job where I worked for somebody. So,
And you were there for a while, right? So that's 5 years, right?
Yeah, 5 years.
You took on a lot of responsibility. I saw up to like leading a team of 180 people by the end of it. And obviously, so you went to this bigger company, because I talk about this too with folks about, I'd worked in kind of smaller environments and I went to a bigger company and all the pros of that, which is like, I learned what a very highly functioning system actually looks like versus my own concept of it. So for you at that time there, at Symantec, post acquisition. Again, high points for you. Like, what were some of the things? Obviously, I mean, escalating responsibilities got to be one of them, but kind of high point and biggest takeaway before you moved on.
Yeah, I'll give you three. One of them was, as you alluded to, getting a chance to run a bigger team. And I basically ran like a business unit. We bought this company and I became like the general manager of it internally. And it did really well. And I was fortunate to be a part of it. But it gave me that feeling that I'd had in my startup and I missed, which is like running your own thing.
Yeah.
And so the first big high point, strangely, was eventually it kind of told me I got to go back and do it again on my own, because I love running my own thing and like creating a culture. We created this like little culture for our business unit within the bigger company. And it felt like our own thing. And we'd have our own like sales kickoff and we'd have our all hands. And it was just run our style, which felt really good. So that was one high point. Second thing I saw was, one thing that's great about some of these larger companies, you build incredible networks, right? And actually the group of people that worked at this company, Veritas, which then got bought by Symantec, the executives there, all across tech, so many of them in so many important roles. Like, Mike Spicer was my boss. He's a now famous first investor in Snowflake as an example. Like a lot of these people taught me so much, which was really incredible. And then I think the third thing I took away from working in a large company is both, as you said, getting the learnings about how to do things right, but also losing the fear that large companies are invulnerable. Like when you're doing some of you listen might be doing startups. If you haven't worked in a big company, you may not realize that big companies are not perfect. It looks really scary when big company X announces a press release to like do something in your space. And what you don't realize is how many thousands of meetings they have to go through before they make their next move and how many people they have to check with, not because they're dumb. I mean, big company people are smart too. There's no difference, but they just have a lot more stuff to deal with. And so I think working in a big company gives you a little more confidence that David can defeat the Goliath, in some cases.
Well, yeah. And a lot of times what I see is that I don't think companies realize it until it was too late, right? So I was right about this time, right before you went to Live Office, I was at Career Builder, which at the time had passed Monster, was the largest job site. And I'll never forget this. So I was in the executive leadership program, and this was 2010. And traffic wise, we were the largest. And I remember we had to do competitive analysis, and my group got LinkedIn. And I'll never forget this meeting where I'm sitting there and I'm presenting, look, LinkedIn's a threat, and we're talking about it. This is a threat. This is a threat. Oh, they've told us they don't even want to get into the job space. Quote, end quote. And I'm just like, my gut tells me you're wrong here. Like my gut tells me like they're building a professional network for something, not just because they're like altruistic and want people to connect. And I think that that's a really good call out for a lot of people, and a lot of times it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over a month. It's that you look back and you go, oh, wait a second. We haven't built a moat. We've built we like the drawbridge is down, or there's actually everyone's shifted to this other region now. And like, stuck over here.
I love that. You're totally right. You can track over time all these little companies you met, like in your case, LinkedIn, that can become huge, and it gives you confidence that like that could be your company someday.
That can be you.
Yeah.
So you go to Live Office, you do a brief stopover as an EIR, right? Which I think it obviously is a good move. And I mean, for you, was that a move to like get just like, I've been there for 5 years. Let me just take a break. Let me just see what's out there.
Nailed it. It's very, very lucky, obviously, for people to get to do it. But, especially in Silicon Valley, they do bring in these VC firms, bring in executives into what they call an entrepreneur in residence or executive in residence program to basically just figure out what you want to do, which shows you, by the way, how wacky Silicon Valley is, that there's firms that will pay you to figure out what you want to do. That's definitely makes you realize your privilege in life when somebody's saying, hey, why don't you come hang out here and just figure out what you want to do with your life. So
that's right. Well, Nick, then they don't have to get their hands dirty, right? Then they got Nick, and they're like, Nick, you go do this.
That's right
over here. So I'll show up every quarter. Okay, that's my that's my job here. Okay, so then, and I don't know, was Live Office? I mean, I think that you were brought in, right?
I was brought in. Yeah, so I didn't found that one. Yeah, it was interesting because the company they were pivoting from an older business into SaaS and cloud. And so I got to see like firsthand, what's it like when you become a SaaS company, when you become a cloud company, all the aspects. I mean, everything from how you sell to market to like running the like operations, like keeping the software up, but then also obviously customer success, which is later on,
I want to understand where that starts to come in. So if that starts to come in, is it at Live Office where you start to understand?
Oh my gosh, 100%. Basically, I am in this company and I have that old mindset that you probably remember as well, which is like that old mindset. The only thing that matters is building technology and then selling it. And then after you sell it, like, okay, we have some customer support or whatever.
That's right.
That's like the mindset every company had pre 2010 or whatever, right? And then I'm running this SaaS business, and I'm basically, honestly, I have that old mindset. Where I'm actually, one story I didn't tell you is when I was a kid, I remember my dad taking me to work one day, and like a take your kid to work day. There's this photo I have of my dad and me together at this thing, and my dad says, like, if you ever go into business, make sure you're either the person building the product or the person selling the product, because everyone else is overhead. Once you've sold the customer, you've got them, right? And that's like that's the mindset.
Yeah, that's the mindset.
My dad wasn't wrong. Like, that's just what it was. But then I'm running this SaaS business where the customers basically paid us month to month or year to year, right? So they could go anytime they wanted, and they had tons of ability to switch. It wasn't like they were locked into Live Office. And I remember, I mean, it's embarrassing, but I remember sitting with our CFO and looking at like our financials and saying, like, looking at our revenue. And our revenue didn't grow quarter to quarter as much as our sales did. And I said, well, what happened to all that sales? And he said, have you heard of churn? I was like, oh yeah, churn. Yeah, right. Churn. I've heard of churn. And so then what's interesting is the other anecdote I'll tell you is in this company, I came in running that old playbook of, okay, focus on the product and focus on sales. And we had these, executive running product, executive running sales, and spent a lot of time with them, and it was great. But I ended up spending more time with the person running customer success. We called it client services back then, but basically the same thing, than either of them put together. This guy named Steve Wolf, who's our client services customer success person, that guy he and I talked like every single day, because the clients were so important to us, right, in our business model, and keeping them, making sure they're using the product, onboarding them, renewing them, expanding them, all that stuff that you do in customer success. I spend more time on that than I did on anything else. So as a CEO, it was like a wake up call. I'm like, wow, this really changes everything.
Yeah. And so you're there. This is your first, well, I mean, I guess the others were acquisitions, but this is like your first real acquisition. Got it up to 25 million, exited for 115. So that had to feel good. Right. So you're coming out of that. What about biggest kick in the teeth there? Like, what was the biggest moment there? I mean, obviously you're like, wait a second, these cohorts aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Like my Sequoia model says that it should do. Like,
exactly.
That's an issue. But what was the biggest learning there? 4 years, you were brought in, you scaled it to a certain level, you chose to exit. So what was your big, again, kind of kick in the teeth or learning moments in that one?
I'll give you both a couple kicks in the teeth, and then maybe a couple learnings as well. So the kick in the teeth, it's so easy. Honestly, it was I loved the company and the people and the everything we built, but it was hard because it was sort of like it was a bootstrap company, and they hadn't raised any money into the business. The money that the investors put in basically had bought out some of the founders. So we were running on a kind of a shoestring budget, and the founders done an incredible job without raising any money. But sometimes if you've been around for a long time, your technology can just get old, right? Like it just, so we were built like pre-cloud. We were running in physical data centers with like servers and, networking gear and all that. So anyways, and by the way, the other thing to know is we had like a bunch of different offerings, but one of them was we were actually hosting email for people, like meaning running their actual email. This is before Microsoft had a really good cloud email offering. Right. We were doing something like that. Anyways, I remember like literally like the like moment I started getting text messages in my hotel room. I was in a hotel room and it was like 3 a.m. and I was set up to like get a text when our systems were down.
Right.
And I just got a text and I was like, oh, that's probably just like an hour went back to sleep. And then like another text and then just started escalating. All these are all automated. And literally for like 48 hours, maybe more. At this point, I remember everything was down. All of our customers. And literally every single customer was emailing. Then they couldn't email because the email was down. Like calling.
That's a positive.
Oh, it was they were so mad and like emailing our board members with the most creatively angry stuff about like they looked up where our company was. So it was in the Los Angeles area, and it's El Segundo, California was where our data center was, and they said. One of the emails said, El Segundo, it's the Spanish word for where technology goes to die. That's literally in the email they sent to us. I was like, that's pretty creative.
That was at least creative, right?
I gotta give you props. So anyways, we had like this, crazy like outages and all this, and there was many of them like that. So like learning how to deal with intestinal fortitude, angry customers, stressed out employees, so much beyond. Like I've never had anything that's anywhere close to as scary or concerning, and therefore, honestly, like nothing has felt that bad because once you build
exactly.
And then a similar one, we had our own like kind of billing system, and then we implemented Zora, which is a great product, but we implemented it in an ineffective way. And so, anyways, long story short, we did not bill properly, and so therefore we almost ran out of money, even though we were profitable, because the billings weren't going out. Too much detail to explain. And so, literally, our bank account for our company almost dropped to zero. There was like a few $1,000s in it, even though we were profitable, and we were all about to like loan money to the company. Actually, the founder ended up saving the company because he loaned money to the company. But yeah, both those times, like literally, we almost went out of business 2 different ways. And so those were more like, okay, we can get through anything if we get through that. And then I think learning more strategically is actually, that like learning you get when you've done something and you've done it pretty well, but you can do it better. And so I think Live Office for me was that like it did pretty well, but there was a lot of things we inherited. And honestly, I was first-time CEO. I wasn't the best I could be, and I still am not the best I could be. But I learned a lot of. I put a lot of things onto that list of what will I do differently next time, right? All those things that you'd like. I'm sure you've seen had those lists yourself, and that list really like helped me make Gainsight, my life's work to date. So I learned so much from Live Office. It was an awesome experience, and let me be even better next time.
I love it. And then you do similar. You go take a little break with Excel. Yep. You do the EIR move again. Right. And then again, similar. So I actually didn't know this, that you joined as CEO in February of 2013.
Yeah, it was a very early stage company. So I was thinking about doing a startup myself, and I was, deciding whether to start something from scratch or, join somebody else. And I was spending time with VCs, and one investor introduced me to the founders of Gainsight. We were originally called something else before. And it was a very early company, really like about $100,000 of ARR and 6 beta customers.
I saw 125,000 and 10 customers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so it was very, very early. But because of the experience at Live Office, my last company, I had seen like how important customer success was. And I even at some point had an idea that somebody should do something in this space. I'd even written a little idea about it. And so anyways, I met our 2 founders. I just fell in love with the people and the idea. It was super early, but I was like, let me come on, as like the sort of almost like just basically help be part of the founding team, but early, kind of a late co-founder and CEO to help get this thing started. And then we raised money from Battery, and then obviously off to the races, and then a long marathon.
Yeah, I saw that. So in 2 years, let's go to 2015 then, right? Yep. So 2 years, you go from 250K in funding and 125 in bookings. Actually, I don't know if I know that, or I know the customers, 10 customers, to 260 customers and 104 million raised.
Yeah.
So what was that 2 years like? And you think about 2013 to 2015, right? If you can kind of remember those days of, there's an airplane, there's a lot of duct tape, but this thing's still flying. What were some of like the memories that you from that phase that really stand out?
Yeah, it's interesting. So that phase, we actually talked about the company as being kind of 4 phases. Actually 5 phases now. We call those G1, G2, G3, G4, G5. And G1 was that very beginning, just getting started. And G2 is the phase you described, Jake, of like 2013 to 2015, which is, basically we're trying to create this category of customer success. And we're not the only ones doing it. And we're not it's really the whole community doing it together. We're trying to facilitate people realizing customer success is a thing. And so early on, just a few memories that were vivid. One was the first Pulse conference we ever did, 2013. And you were 300 people in a kind of a hotel in San Francisco. And honestly, we thought maybe we'd get 50 people there. So way more than our expectations, because we just didn't know if this was a thing or not. And a bunch of CEOs showed up, and it was really like a very delightful, like early experience. And that kind of, I think, gave us confidence that this could be a thing. So that was kind of one big memory. A second big memory was getting our first like marquee customer at the time in our space, which was Box. Early, well-recognized SaaS company. And I remember, since you're a sales professional, I remember like personally just working on that deal for like 2 years. I mean, literally, I would go to their office almost every week. And I knew the receptionist, and I knew, like, we'd talk about, like, I'd go in there, be like, you're back again. And I was saying,
I love it.
Wi-Fi password. They should give me a badge. Like all those jokes.
Yeah.
Right? And then we eventually got them. And, I remember, like, going to the, like, little wine store down the street and buying, like, cheap champagne, and all of us opening it. And I'm sure everybody listening that's done a startup has a memory like that, your first big customer. We even made a music video halfway through the sales process to try to convince them. Actually, here's some fun trivia. Some people probably know there's a 90s song called "What If God Was One of Us." It's a very fun, cheesy song. Was one of us. Yeah, so we made "What If Box Was One of Us," which is about Box.
Does that video exist?
Terrible. It exists on the internet somewhere. And then the third, staying on the music theme. Third was third memory from the early days, which ties to sort of, I think, part of our strategy was we weren't just creating a software category. We're creating a new community of this, like, job, customer success manager, and we've been really fortunate to just be part of this incredible community of what was a small group initially, and now very big people trying to help drive success for their customers and for their business and all that. And so I remember in the second Pulse, we had we had the audience together, and there's, let's say, 600 people, and it felt like this incredible community. And I remember us saying at some point, my marketing leader and I saying, you know what we should do? We should do a sing-along. And so we actually literally had it was actually very well staged. We had these people come onto the stage, and we were, like, pretending they were going to do, like, a cappella song, and they bombed out. We had intentionally these, like, professional singers, like, bombed out on stage. Like, they were really bad. And then a couple people in the audience that were like plants, we had them start singing and the Sweet Caroline. And then basically the whole audience got up and started doing Sweet Caroline together, like everyone, like the entire group.
I love it. That's a great one. You picked the perfect song. I mean, like, that is the
ultimate. If you're going to pick a song, that's it. And so that thing kind of continues to this day, where it's, like, really a community, and we have a shared culture, and the people support each other, and they laugh, and they make music videos, and it's incredible. It really is a community.
And how did you, so as you go through here, how did you stay focused on CS? One of the things I think that's really interesting about your company is that, you stayed focused. And right. I think so often in those early days, I can't imagine people were like, oh, hey, you're doing this for my CS team.
Yeah.
What can you do for my sales team? So how did you make decisions on because I feel like this is where whether you're someone on the front lines up to a CEO, you have these moments about staying focused, and you'll never know the opportunity cost. You'll never know, right? So what made you stay focused? What was it for you that kind of kept you focused, and what were maybe some of the things that you said no to as you were scaling?
Really good point. And by the way, I'll probably give you a mixed answer where I think there's such a tough balance between focus, but also having like more things so you continue to kind of find more ways to grow. And I'd say we did it okay, but we did some things well and some things I wish we had done differently, so being totally honest. So The thing we did well was, as you said, like customer success. We've been at it from 2013 till now. I probably said it like 100,000 times at this point. We didn't get off message too much. We've written 3 books on it. We've done, these conferences. And I think that part of that was recognizing that power of when you have a group of human beings choosing careers based on a certain domain, it's almost unstoppable, right? There's all these people that have voted to say, I'm going into customer success management. That's not a temporary short-term thing. This is people making career decisions. So we always felt like it's like a bit of an unstoppable wave. And one of the things that I've done as a thought experiment, whenever I had those moments of doubt, which are very frequent, to be honest, Jake, like all the time, what I always do is say, like, okay, let me ask myself a few questions. In the future, will customers have more or less power over their vendors? And for me, I always said the answer is more. Obviously, customers are getting more power every day. And then in the future, will vendors therefore need to focus more or less on their existing customers? I'll say more, obviously, right? And then the final question I ask is, why shouldn't it be us to end up figuring that out then? If it's going to happen, why not us? Like, why should we not do it, right? Like, this isn't Math 25. We're smart enough. we can do it. Like, why not us? And like, imagine that we threw in the towel and somebody else did it. And like we're doing all that work to go all the way. And then at the 10-yard line, somebody else gets to punch it in. Like, that doesn't feel great. So why not us? And that's what we still to this day, we talk about. Now, the reason I said there's a caveat is I do think that like, it's okay to expand the vision. You can stay focused.
Of course, yeah.
And, for us, for example, like we think customer success requires everyone in the company to be aligned around the customer. So we launch products around how sales can be involved and product can be involved and marketing and so on. And so I think it's actually important to expand and grow your vision. And the best entrepreneurs find that balance. And I think we should have probably grown our vision even earlier because sometimes you want to keep growing that sort of opportunity and all that. And I think if I could have done it better, probably a year or two earlier would have started it, but better late than never. So.
Sure. Yeah, it turned out all right, right?
Yeah.
It ended up being just fine for you.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
All right, so there's a couple more things.
Yeah.
So you're growing at this breakneck speed. Things are going well. You're learning. There's sing-alongs. There's things that are happening. There's an article you wrote in 2016, and I might mess up the pronunciation. Is it Ship of Theseus?
Theseus, yeah.
Theseus, that's what I thought. And it's really interesting. So one, when you talk about this, G1, 2, 3, 4, 5, talk about one, explain to people what it is, because I'm sure you can do it more eloquently than I can. And two, how does that apply to company building? And then maybe even, is it applicable to humans? And is it applicable to us as people too, as we grow and mature? But I think first off, how does that apply to a company, as you're growing and scaling? Yeah. When you think about this concept.
I love that you pulled that one out. The Ship of Theseus is a parable and kind of a bit of a philosophical question, which is basically based on this kind of mythical figure Theseus, who allegedly a long time ago defeated the Minotaur in Greece. Minotaur was that big monster, right? That some of you can probably visualize. And Theseus, in a celebration for defeating the Minotaur, was given a wooden ship by the people of Greece. And basically that ship was kept in harbor, I think in Athens or something like that. And so that ship was made of wood. So obviously wood does rot over time. And over the years, even after Theseus died, they kept the ship, but they would, when a plank would rot, they'd replace the plank with another plank, right? When the masthead would rot, they'd replace the masthead. When the kind of ships, basically sails, tore, they'd replace the sails. And so the philosophical question is, once every part of the ship of Theseus has been replaced, is it still the ship of Theseus? And as you alluded to, this question can be absolutely easily be applied to human beings, because I think on average, cells in our body, I think it's over 7 years, every single cell in your body has been replaced.
Okay.
Right? Because, you replace all the cells in your skin and your blood.
You're a Harvard biochem major, okay? Like that's, you know this. I love it.
That kind of something to that effect. And so, all of us, like what, who we are today versus yesterday, like, is it the same person or not? These are classic philosophical questions. In a company, it's the same kind of thing, because it's like Gainsight in 2013 versus now. I mean, honestly, it's sometimes it's pretty sobering to think about, because you're like, so much has changed. Like our product is not at all, like, I don't even know how much, like maybe a few lines of code are the same, right? Thankfully, like it keeps getting better. And like team-wise, you look at those old team photos, I think a lot of companies feel this, and it's like, oh yeah, most of those people have gone on to do great things, and we're still friends with them, and they're alumni, and they're doing awesome work. And so this thing of like, okay, Gainsight, it's the same Gainsight, but it's not the same Gainsight. And, kind of being willing to sort of embrace the history, but also reinvent yourself every day. And I always tell people, like new people at Gainsight, like I speak to every new hire class, I'm like, I hope genuinely the best days in Gainsight are ahead of us. And I hope you're going to look back on this day and think back to this being the old days of Gainsight. And your ideas are more valuable than anyone's, because you haven't been here the whole time. One of the values we embrace is beginner's mind. The idea that like the best way to innovate is to look at things from a beginner perspective. And so the idea is like constantly innovate, constantly reinvent yourself. Amazon says it best. Jeff Bezos says it's always day one, right? It's always day one at Amazon. And this is basically a similar concept.
Yeah. And I think a lot of companies, either they hold on too long, just like a lot of people, right? We hold on to these things that we're who we were before, but it's a shipboard that might need to be replaced. But I thought it's a really interesting and important concept. I think as companies do that maturation, and you go from 0 to 20, 20 to 60, 60 to a few hundred to 1,000. I think you see these things, and really the companies that make it have that mindset. They have the mindset that the core, the vision is still the same, and it's changing and evolving. And that's the heart of it, right? whether it's still the ship or not.
That's the thing. You have to be really clear about what that identity and vision is. Like for us, it's our 5 values and our company purpose statement, which is to be living proof you can win in business while being human first. So that concept of human first business, our 5 values, and kind of customer success at its core, those don't change. But everything else, like, be willing to reinvent.
I love that. And don't hold on from an ego standpoint.
Yeah,
I think that's that ego is what stops us from doing that so frequently. Then 2018, you make your rap debut. Well, I guess I didn't know about this earlier music video. So we're going to drop the link for Who's Fired Up, by the way. Who's Fired Up, probably one of the most underrated rap songs of all time.
It's the number one rap song in the customer success genre, I believe.
I think that is totally a safe bet. So we'll drop that. So let's fast forward and talk about, last year, right? You dropped the book, right? The Customer Success Economy. So I want to talk about that. And I also want to talk about a post you did about the end of pre-sales and post-sales, because I thought it was kind of a early precursor. Then as the book gave life, I kind of got a feeling that there's like more to it. So talk to me about like where you're at now. And then obviously, look, last year you drop a book that does extremely well. Vista comes along and says, hey, we think this is an interesting space. So you're acquired by Vista. So 2020 for you was a very interesting year. But I want to know about how your thinking's evolved, about the customer journey. This is something I'm obviously super passionate about, but for you, talk to me about like kind of the ethos of the book, this idea of pre-sales and post-sales not mattering anymore. For those, and we'll drop a link to the book too, so everyone make sure you go and check that out as well.
So I think it's all related together, Jake, and I think it ties very much to what you're talking about and kind of bridges to the beginning of the conversation, because I mentioned that my dad said that, in business, all that matters is building a product and selling it, right? And that idea of like, you're either pre-sales when you have to really convince the customer and wine and dine them and all that. And then post-sales when it's like, okay, that's customer support. If it breaks, they'll call you, right? That's the mindset we all have come from. And that's why, you have a pre-sales and a post-sale. But let's look at the current world. In most product categories, the customer is kind of always in pre-sale because they're kind of always using it, and if they like it and get value, they'll keep using it. It's always
been that way, Nick. That's the punchline. It's
always that's right. And I think, by the way, I believe the best sales professionals have always been like this. They've always been selling value. They've always been building long-term relationships. They've always been focused on outcomes. But I think that we got lulled into this sense of like comfort. Oh yeah, customers, they're sold, they're stuck. We acquired them, acquired. That's another word that's interesting, right? And we believe that in the new world, you're in this constant, never-ending cycle towards getting the customer towards customer success, getting them to the outcomes they were looking for and getting them there with great experiences. And that concept of customer success is not something that is just after the sale or just before the sale. It's continuous. It starts the first time the customer hears about your value proposition, and then they see your product, and then they go into a demo, and then they're getting implemented, and it just never ends, because then they're going to grow and buy more stuff from you, or they're going to churn. And so this idea that there's no pre-sale and post-sale anymore, you're constantly selling, you're constantly trying to drive value, it never ends. And so that's why we wrote this book, Customer Success Economy, because customer success started out as a department. You have all your other departments, you have this new department, and their job is make the customer happy, make sure they're using it, make sure they're getting value, make sure they don't churn, right? But that doesn't work. You need everyone in the company aligned around the customer.
But I mean, do you feel like, where are we at in this continuum, right? So like, let's say if, my note was like, how much of this is hopeful versus possible?
Yeah.
And anything's possible. And I think philosophically, we're 100% aligned. I've said this many times, like, what's the goal of a sales organization?
Right.
Well, it's the goal of the sales organization actually isn't to produce a signed contract. It's to produce a power user, right? The whole goal of a company is to produce power users, right? Like, that's what we want, right? Because at the end of the day, that is a true definition of win-win, right? And it also means, it's going to drop churn, increase conversions. And so you have this land, adopt, expand, renew, right?
Right.
If step, I don't, you can kind of put us in the continuum. 10 is we're there. We really, now the new buzzword is RevOps. Oh, what's going to fix everything is RevOps. We have one person who looks at this stuff, and I can get into that for a long period. But where do you think we're at? Like, I'm in agreement that we need to just shift our mindset away from this BANT command of the message-ish world to this understanding of where the customer is today. So where do you think we're at, and what do you feel are some of the biggest, detractors or barriers that we have to overcome?
Yeah, I'd say pre-COVID, I'd say we were at a 4 out of 10, and now I think we're at a 6 out of 10 in that transition. And I think we jumped a couple, probably like a lot of categories, because companies have figured out that, getting the customer, making sure that they're getting value, all that stuff is just existential. People get it. What drives the change and what are the barriers? Honestly, it's mostly familiarity, Jake. Like when you look at new companies and new founders, they're doing this stuff 100% from the beginning. They're not saying, why do we need to worry about whether the customer is getting value and success? It's honestly like, frankly, sometimes they're like, do we really need sales? And now, by the way, I think they do need sales because sales is also hard and sometimes doesn't get enough credit. But they don't start, they have the beginner's mind. Mm-hmm. They're starting from first principles. Where I think there's adjustment and the barriers largely are people that have always done it in that traditional mindset of, hey, it's just sales. Let's just get the customer and then move on to the next one. And luckily, I think there's more and more people who are seeing the new model. They're seeing it in different ways, right? They're seeing it because their new team is thinking this way. They're seeing it because they did an acquisition, and the acquisition runs it. Like you see a lot of big companies that acquire a company and they're like, wow, this company runs so much better than our parent company. We need to adopt the mindset of this company. They're seeing it because they're the legacy player and they're being disrupted by the new next gen disruptor. And they run with customer success at the center. So it's showing up in a lot of different ways, but the barrier largely is just like institutional mindset. That's like the number one barrier. There's other barriers. There's data. There's all kinds. But
there's comp plans.
But they all come from mindset. What do you wake up at? Like you said, Jake, what is the purpose of your company? I'd argue the purpose for companies, like you said, create power users, create advocates, or sometimes we say drive business outcomes. That's why we're here, to drive outcomes for our customers, right? The purpose of the company is not sales. That's why I think one tell is when a CEO says, I'm a sales-driven CEO. And I say, I love sales. It's important. But sales is part of this process of driving customers to value, right? And so I think there's some mindset shifts that have to happen.
Yeah. And I think too, there's a point when segmentation hurts.
Yeah.
And for me, when I was, VP of sales at Glassdoor and other places, I would not ever take a VP role where I wasn't also the VP of customer success.
That's awesome.
Because then there's no disincentive, right? I'm a big proponent of a radical new comp plan idea that has a portion of sales comp tied to usage.
Yeah.
Shocking. As opposed to just 100% based on a signed contract. Again, there's just a lot of perverse incentives we've created with this specialization of this person's comp this way, this person's this way.
That's so well said, Jake. That's one of every new industry has to start somewhere. And I'm glad we created these CSM teams. But the reason we have to evolve to the customer success economy is you can't keep it a silo. You've got to bring it together with sales. Totally well said.
You have to. So, all right, last question.
Yeah.
Okay? You've exited now. You're going to go right off into the sunset at some point, right? Not the sunset.
This is just new. And just to be clear, new investors. So we are gunning hard. Actually,
no, you're going to be pushing.
We're growing the company this year more than we've ever grown in headcount and R&D and all that. So yeah, we're going for it.
So what's next for Gainsight? What's next for you? What's next for Gainsight? So as you get this new infusion, right? Yep. So you're not riding off to the sunset. You're buckling down. You're ready to rock. What's new? So if we say, we've talked a little bit about where the puck is going a little bit. Yeah. What's new for you? What's next for you? What's the next challenge you're most excited about?
Yeah, totally. So 3 things. So number 1 is, we're going to continue to make sure that this customer success industry gets the support and community so it can really thrive, because it's still just getting started in many ways. Number 2 is we're going to expand that, like I mentioned, so that everyone in the company can be involved in customer success. We've got a really popular product called Gainsight PX for product analytics and adoption. We've got a product called revenue optimization, and we'll be building more, in some cases, maybe doing some more acquisitions to build out that portfolio. And then number 3, we want to build a company for the long term. So honestly, get this company to be a big independent company so that we can help fulfill the mission we've got of really driving customer success, a company-wide thing, and proving out this human first concept of business. So, and one day maybe make our parents proud as well. So that's the highest hurdle.
Better be on the cover of Time.
That's right. One day.
That has got to be the goal, my friend. Well, look, we've covered a lot. Nick, this was a lot of fun, man. I really enjoyed the conversation.
You asked awesome questions. Yeah, thank you so much, Jake. Really enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it. Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.